Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the high stakes, honestly kind of chaotic world of building a successful venture from scratch. Whether you're an independent entrepreneur hacking away in a garage, or you're part of an innovation team inside some massive legacy corporation, you already know that launching a new business has historically been a huge hit or miss proposition. But today, we're going to explore a framework that fundamentally shifts those odds. We're going to learn how to launch the imperfect business and then let the market actually guide us to success. But first, we've got to face the music. 75%. Yeah, let that sink in. That is a staggering statistic from Harvard Business School's Shekhar Ghosh, and it represents the failure rate of startups. For decades, conventional wisdom told founders to sit down and write this exhaustive, perfect 5-year business plan in total isolation. You know the drill. They'd raise a ton of money, lock themselves in a room to build a fully featured product, and then do a massive public launch. Well, in our story today, that traditional perfect business plan is actually the villain. Way too often, companies completely exhaust their capital building a product, only to launch and discover that the underlying customer demand is entirely non-existent. No one actually wants what they built. Okay, let's dive into this exact paradigm shift that changes everything. See, the traditional management paradigm relies on linear waterfall development cycles. It's all about executing a static plan and staying in stealth mode until this giant dramatic public launch. But the entrepreneurial management paradigm, it recognizes that a startup isn't just a smaller version of a big company, not at all. Instead, a startup is a temporary organization, and its sole purpose is to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. It's dynamic, it's highly iterative, and it relies on rapid, cross-functional sprints that engage the customer right from day one. So to get a handle on all this, here is a roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Enter the lean startup. 2. Measuring progress. 3. Engines of growth. And 4. Pivots and the local maximum. Let's get into it. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Enter the lean startup. This methodology is a really brilliant synthesis of a few powerful ideas. It basically brings together Steve Blank's concept of customer development, which is this simple but radical idea that you actually have to get out of the building and talk to real people, with Eric Ries' application of agile software engineering. And the whole shebang is deeply rooted in Toyota's legendary lean manufacturing principles. But in this context, waste isn't about physical materials on an assembly line. Waste is any human effort or capital that doesn't directly contribute to validated learning about what customers actually want. At the absolute heartbeat of this methodology is a highly structured feedback loop: build, measure, learn. The primary objective for literally any startup is to minimize the total time it takes to traverse this cycle. By rapidly building a super basic prototype, measuring exactly how customers interact with it, and then learning from that data to make immediate changes, a venture maximizes its learning velocity. You are quite literally learning your way toward a sustainable business model before your bank account runs dry. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is the definition of the minimum viable product, or MVP. It is the absolute simplest version of a product required to collect maximum validated learning with minimal effort. An MVP absolutely does not need to be perfect. In fact, it shouldn't be. It doesn't even need to be fully coded or built out. It just needs enough substance to elicit real, honest feedback on what people find useful without requiring you to invest years of your life and millions of dollars. To really ground this, let's look at 3 famous real-world MVPs. Dropbox didn't start by building this massive, flawless cloud infrastructure. Nope. Founder Drew Houston just made a simple 3-minute screencast video pretending the software was ready. And overnight, his waiting list blew up from 5,000 to 75,000 signups. Then there's Zappos. Founder Nick Swinmurn tested online shoe demand without holding a single box of inventory in a warehouse. He literally just took photos of shoes at local malls, posted them online, and bought them at full retail price when someone placed an order. And Eric Ries himself launched IMView with these basic, incredibly buggy 3D avatars that would just crash people's computers. After 6 whole months of work, they made a grand total of $300 in their first month. But you know what? That buggy MVP let them quickly discover they were targeting the wrong users with the wrong features. That realization sparked the rapid iterations that eventually grew IMView to 50 million users. Moving right along to Section 2, Measuring Progress. Because as you can guess, building that MVP is really only half the battle. Knowing how to measure its impact is what actually dictates your success. And that introduces a concept known as innovation accounting. Think about it. When you don't have traditional financial metrics like massive sales or ROI to rely on yet, how do you actually know you aren't just spinning your wheels? Well, you have to know the difference between vanity metrics and actionable metrics. Vanity metrics are things like gross page views, cumulative registered users, or the total amount of capital you've raised. They almost always go up over time, which creates this superficial, glossy appearance of market traction. They make you feel really good about yourself, but they are a dangerous trap because they don't reflect the underlying health of the business. Actionable metrics, on the other hand, show clear cause and effect relationships. If you change a specific feature in your app, actionable metrics tell you exactly how that change altered your customers' behavior. To ensure your data is actually doing its job, it must pass the test of the 3 A's of measurement. First, it's got to be actionable, meaning it directly links product changes to customer actions. Second, it has to be accessible. The data must be simple enough that everyone on your cross-functional team, from the hardcore engineers to the marketing folks, can easily understand it. And third, it must be auditable. It has to be transparently verifiable by cross-referencing it with raw customer records. If your team doesn't trust the reporting, the whole system falls apart. Which brings us to Section 3, Engines of Growth. So once you've actually validated that people want what you're making and you have the hard metrics to prove it, it's time to scale. A startup must eventually focus on a single, systemic feedback loop to acquire customers sustainably. Let me tell you, trying to do too many things at once at this stage usually just leads straight to burnout. And this breakdown brilliantly illustrates the 3 primary engines of growth you can choose from. The sticky engine focuses squarely on customer retention. Here, your net growth is basically your new customer acquisition rate minus your churn rate. So if your churn is high, meaning people are leaving in droves, this engine is busted. Then there's the viral engine, which relies on network effects. This is measured by the viral coefficient. If every single customer brings in more than one new customer, boom, your growth goes exponential. Finally, the paid engine involves purchasing attention through ads or sales teams. For this to actually work, your customer lifetime value, or LTV, absolutely must be strictly greater than your customer acquisition cost, or CAC. You take that marginal profit, you reinvest it, and you just buy more growth. But what actually happens when you're desperately trying to find this growth and the clock is just relentlessly ticking? Well, think of Eric Ries's runway metaphor. Your runway is simply the amount of cash you have in the bank divided by your monthly burn rate. To put that into perspective, if you have $550,000 in the bank and you're draining $50,000 every single month, you have exactly 11 months of runway left. You have 11 months to achieve liftoff or you crash and burn. When that runway starts getting short and those engines just aren't firing, it's time to make a drastic move. Which leads us to our final phase, Section 4, Pivots and the Local Maximum. When systematic testing reveals that your core assumptions are just wrong and you're running out of runway, you have to execute a pivot. Because the search for true product-market fit, it is a chaotic, completely multi-directional journey. But listen closely, a pivot isn't just quitting. It's not throwing your hands up in failure. A pivot is a highly structured course correction. Think of it kind of like a basketball move. You keep one foot firmly planted on the ground in the validated learning you've already accumulated, while your other foot steps out to test a completely new, often radically different direction. Actually, some of the biggest companies in the world are the direct result of massive pivots. Did you know Twitter originally started as ODO, a podcasting platform? Yeah, when Apple's iTunes completely dominated that space, they smartly pivoted into microblogging. YouTube actually started as a video dating site, of all things, but they quickly realized the real value was in an ad-supported, open-access video distribution model. That's what we call a value capture pivot. And Fab.com, they started as a social media site for gay men before pivoting entirely into a highly successful design e-commerce platform. Pivoting is literally what saves companies from stagnation. So the crucial point is understanding when you are trapped in what's known as the local maximum. The lean startup relies really heavily on the hill climbing algorithm. Making minor adjustments based on customer feedback to slowly but surely climb the hill of success. But what if you climb to the very top of a tiny hill and you're entirely missing the massive mountain of opportunities sitting right next door? Blindly relying purely on incremental optimization, like just split testing the color of a sign-up button for months, cannot transform an inherently unviable product into a breakthrough. To reach the global maximum, you have to be willing to climb back down that little hill and take a bold strategic risk. Which leaves us with this final, somewhat provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up. As you go out and build your own ventures, ask yourself, are you relying a little too much on customer feedback rather than trusting your own strategic vision? The lean startup is an absolute masterclass in scientific experimentation and validation for sure, but it cannot replace the bold necessity of intelligent design and having a unique, contrarian insight. Finding that delicate balance between the two, well, that is the true art of the modern entrepreneur. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep building.